Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you have experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. As we gather this morning, let us pause and acknowledge that the ground upon which we gather is the ancestral and current homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. With humility for the ways in which we have unwittingly participated in the harms perpetuated in the past and present, we seek now to learn a new way forward. We begin to partner, to ally, and witness with our Indigenous siblings and friends the bringing forth of a new sacred dream of a community restored to fullness and a world healed to a greater wholeness. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Caitlin Collins, and my pronouns are she and her, and it's good to see you all on this beautiful morning. Welcome to everyone gathered here with us in the sanctuary and to those at home in our virtual audience. We extend an especially warm welcome to any of you who are new, however you define that. And we're glad you're here. And if you want to get to know us better, there's a table in the front, and we'd love to get to know you too. We have a couple of announcements this morning. The annual meeting will be held on Sunday, May 21st, following the Youth Bridging service. There's a potluck lunch, election of officers, budget approval, and discussions and activities with the Anti-Racism Task Force. Please check happenings for the full agenda and the budget proposal in the coming weeks. All are welcome, and the members may vote. Speaking of members, the membership ceremony is on Sunday, May 7th during worship. If you have been considering membership and are ready to officially join, please contact our membership chair, Lora Young. Okay, now's the fun part. We are going to take a minute to fully arrive and welcome one another with joy.
It is indeed so good to be together. I'm going to stand this way so that the sun doesn't blind me for that 15 minutes it's in that window. I am the Reverend Lora Young. It is good to be with you this morning. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I just want to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's here for the first, second, or third time. And also I want to acknowledge the gifts of my worship team, Caitlin, Rick, John, Robb, Sinnamon, my board greeters in the back, Sarah, and Brenda, who's in the office running our virtual team. Worship is truly a collaborative project, and I could not do what I do without all of these people also contributing their gifts, their time, their talent to this process. As we gather for worship this morning, I offer you the words of Alice Walker in her poem, Lodestar. And she writes, Here is what I believe will be the hardest thing to do, to remember that we have a soul. It is so quiet, the soul, in ways almost nothing. It might flash across our dullest days only once or twice in a lifetime. That it is there, just the certainty of knowing, must be our lodestar. So with that, let us light our chalice, invite my chalice lighting friend to come forward, if we found one. Mia. Mia and her brother, or just her brother. I invite you to stand in body, mind, or spirit as we say our chalice lighting words. Those at home are invited to put the name of their street and chalice is lit at the name of their street in the chat box. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. I think it'll work better if you put it on its side a little bit. Yeah, there you go. I don't know if that one's going to go for you or not. So just blow it out. Just perfect. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Please remain standing. This morning it is with sadness that we light our memorial candle. Whenever a beloved member of our congregation dies, an empty space is left. A seat in our sanctuary and a hole in our hearts. This morning I announce with sadness the passing of Michelle Quigley. Our memorial candle burns for her this morning. She is survived by her parents, Phil and Lori, her brother, Mark, and her sister-in-law, Amy, and their children. All of them whom are held in our hearts, in our thoughts, and in our prayers this morning. It is Michelle and her mother who took the original idea of doing something on that front sanctuary wall and ran with the idea and installed that beautiful tree that is applied to that front wall. So I invite you this morning as you see it to think of Michelle and how joyful that tree made her. Our faith in this congregation is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences, beneath all of our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. Let us pause in silent witness to this mystery. Blessed be. Please be seated. And now I'd like to invite all the children and the young at heart and Kayla and Greg and their beautiful daughter Fiona to come toward the front of our room.
And all of our kids, you can have a seat down in this area over here.
You're gonna come up here.
It's really good to see you all for this special celebration this morning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. This morning we are blessed to gather and to welcome a child into the folds of her family and honor her journey going forward. Fiona, it's my turn to hold you. This is my favorite part of my whole job. All of it. Fiona, you're a beloved child of the universe, and we are so glad that you have arrived. Every child comes to us as a gift, and you are no exception. And you remind us of the spark of love that resides within each of us. With each new life comes new responsibilities, new joys, new challenges, and new blessings. So I'm going to invite you to look at your mama and your daddy, maybe. There they are. Kayla and Greg, may this day be one of joy and of celebration, of sweet memory. May this land in which you have made your home, home to the Great Salt Lake, always be a refuge for you and your family. To raise up a human being is one of life's most sacred tasks, and one of the most precious relationships that we can have. You have spent the last few months getting to know this precious child and are ready now to dedicate her in this community. And I invite you now to make some public promises to her in front of your community. Do you promise yourselves in love and in steadfastness to your child? Will you cherish her with your words and actions, teach her truth, justice, compassion, and the inherent worth of every person? Let us, yes, all the people can participate. All the people can participate. Let us now join as a community to dedicate this child into this space of South Valley.
All right. And now, all of you, would you like to stand? We're going to ask you to make some promises to our family this morning. So all of you, these parents have brought their child to be dedicated here today. And as Fiona grows among us, she takes her place with all of you in the activities of this congregation. Will you, all of you, welcome her and help her to find her way? Will you do your best to help Fiona understand that, like you, she is a precious person of inherent worth and dignity? If so, say, "We will." And now will the whole congregation rise?
Will you, members and friends of South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society, rejoice with Kayla and Greg, parents of Fiona, in the life of this child? Will you take it upon yourselves the sacred privilege and responsibility of nurturing Fiona's character and spirit, pledging to her and her parents the love and care of this congregation? If so, say, "We will."
We will.
You may be seated, and the children may be seated as well. Please join us in a moment of prayer.
This is a prayer for our children by Robert Kaufman. We wish for you a storm or two that you may enjoy the calm. We wish for you tranquility in the times of trial. We wish you a cool breeze on a warm day and pale white clouds that you may better appreciate the blueness of the sky. We wish you darkness that you may see the stars. We wish you anticipation of high adventure, and we wish you the courage to avoid battle. We wish you a sense of wonder and poetry and music. We wish you companionship that you may appreciate solitude. We wish you a friend who will understand you, and understanding so that you may have a friend. We wish you may become all that you wish to be, and more than you hope that you can be. We wish for you, Fiona, the ability to always keep your warm and caring heart. And we wish for you the ability to channel your strength and determination to change the world. We wish you a flower to smell, a hand to touch, a voice to cheer, a heart to gladden. And we wish you someone to love as we love you.
Okay, and now we're going to bless her. To you both. Because each child is unique and comes to the world with their own personality and their own path to walk. We bring the blessings and the elements of the earth to bear upon you: water, fire, earth, and air. And this water sanitized from the water communion earlier this year. Fiona, we bless your heart. May bless your heart. May it always be open to your deepest truths. May you understand the still small voice in your heart and follow it with courage, strength, and joy. Fiona, we bless your mind with fire. May your intelligence and your wit guide you to paths of new discovery. May you use your mind to the best of its ability to create goodness and joy and great discovery in your life and in the world around you. We bless your hands with dirt, with the earth. May you come to know the humility of the earth that knows that change is always constant. And may you too nurture yourself and others. Got quite a little grip there, my friend. And we bless you. We bless you with air. May the spirits of creativity flow strong in you. And lastly, we bless you with flowers. May you bloom and grow to fullness. May joy be indeed your lodestar. I'm going to hold that for a minute. I don't think there's any thorns on there except at the bottom. Yeah, go ahead and eat it. It's fine. My dear sweet child, we welcome you into this community, into the larger human family. We are so glad that you were born, and we can't wait to see who you become. May your time here in this community be fruitful, and may your family grow ever more rooted and strong because you are in it. May you be blessed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please welcome Fiona.
All right, and all my friends here, we're going to enjoy the sunshine out on our playground this morning. And I regret, particularly on a day like today, that unfortunately we don't have childcare available downstairs for our littles 3 and younger, but you are more than welcome to join us out on the playground if that is helpful for you. So let's all head down the stairs. Thank you all for being a part of that this morning.
This community, our church, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts you give of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Many of you pledge monthly to support our work, and for this we are grateful. Your gifts help to ensure that we are able to live our values of love and justice in the world outside. Part of our ministry at South Valley includes sharing our Sunday worship offerings with a charitable organization that aligns with our principles and values. This month, we are sharing with the White Helmets, a humanitarian group which provides emergency services in war zones and during environmental disasters. Please join me in reading our offertory words. They are printed in your order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. We will now accept the offering. For those at home, you are invited to use the giving link in the online order of service.
you. For all that we have received and all we have found the courage to give, may we be truly grateful. May these gifts be a blessing on South Valley and on the work of the White Helmets in Syria. Please join me in a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. I will lead you into meditation with a opening of a poem by Joy Harjo, Poet Laureate in the United States, and then out of meditation on the other side with the end of her poem. And in the middle, we will enjoy 3 minutes together in beautiful silence. From her poem, Directions to You. Follow them. Stop. Turn around. Go the other way, left, right, mine, yours. We become lost. Unsteady. Take a deep breath. Pray. You will not always be lost. You are right here. On time. In your time. Let us sink into this time together now. To find, to be found, to be understood, to be seen, heard, felt. You are breath, you are memory, you are touch. You are right here.
Some questions you might ask by Mary Oliver. Is the soul solid like iron? Or is it tender and breakable, like the wings of a moth in the beak of the owl? Who has it and who doesn't? I keep looking around me. The face of the moose is as sad as the face of Jesus. The swan opens her white wings slowly. In the fall, the black bear carries leaves into the darkness. One question leads to another. Does it have a shape? Like an iceberg? Like the eye of a hummingbird? Does it have one lung? Like the snake and the scallop? Why should I have it and not the anteater who loves her children? Why should I have it and not the camel? Come to think of it, what about the maple trees? What about the blue iris? What about all the little stones sitting alone in the moonlight? What about roses and lemons and their shining leaves? What about the grass?
Dr. Ibram Kendi writes, "The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify it and describe it, and then dismantle it, to take it apart." That is from his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And being an anti-racist is a stance, a position that we take in response to what we see and we know and we experience in our hearts, in our minds, embedded in our bodies, to resist those things that would make us small, that would make others even smaller. And describing and identifying behaviors and policies and attitudes, which is something that is very much a part of our culture these days, can be a little confusing because there is so much information and so much vitriol going back and forth between various different sides, expressing that they have the right corner of truth on that elephant that we call this society we live in. Much of what we have learned in our society from birth protects the continuation of a system that sorts and codifies, blames and limits, maims and kills people regularly based on the shade of their skin. We know this. What can be a little bit more tricky is figuring out, what does it actually mean to dismantle? What does it mean to take it apart? What does that actually look like on the ground and in our relationships with one another? We have for a long time equated calling someone a racist with calling them a terrible person. But Dr. Kendi offers an alternate explanation of that. He would have us cease to use the word racist as a pejorative and instead use it as a descriptive, to describe a behavior that we perhaps become aware of in that moment, and we make a decision to no longer continue. Making that slight shift from pejorative to descriptive is critical because it allows us to let our defensiveness down if we are the one who is in a majority position at that moment, in a higher elevated position of power. And it doesn't mean that you want to be in that position of power. It doesn't mean that you feel like it is right. It just means that that is how things have been set up, and you wish to undo that because you have in your heart a desire and a space for compassion and for kindness and for liberation to be the markers of your life and of the life of this community. This is the beginning of awakening. The Buddhists teach us that the path of enlightenment is something that we all must undertake, and it has its precepts and its rules and its ways of having us follow a middle path in order to achieve that. And the Christians have a different path, one that focuses on the identity and the stories of Jesus the Christ as a way of figuring out what it means to be awake. And other traditions have their other teachers and their other teachings about how we might follow this path. And here in this community, our only ask of you is that you find a path and that you follow it with honesty and with integrity. This is the beginning of awakening. And in our time and in our place, awakening looks like awakening to those systemic pieces of our society that must change, that are literally breaking down our culture from the weight of the violence, from the weight that we all know we must no longer bear. Think of this process as perhaps being learning to see the air that we breathe. once you understand that the air that we are breathing has been filled with the toxins of systemic oppression, just as pollution has sometimes filled this valley, actually mostly fills this valley. Once you understand that there is toxins that you cannot particularly see, your thinking can change. You no longer seek to just move to the East Bench. Instead, you seek to understand that we are all connected from Magna to Park City, and all of the air matters. And you start to recognize that the air that is in the worst places needs the most attention, that is the air that needs to be addressed, and that our call is to address the air, not to fight over who is living in what part of the valley and consuming that air. You begin perhaps to examine the ways in which your location, in academic terms, they would call that the social locations. In our metaphor, I would say, how far up the valley wall you're living. Are you living in Magna? Are you living in West Valley? Or are you living in Park City and in the hills of the East Bench where the air is cleaner, where you can actually see that inversion, that pollution on a day? And once you begin to see that pollution, you begin to slow down. And you begin to reconsider your automatic interactions with each other. And perhaps take a moment to honestly interact with them in new ways. It's the beginning of awakening. Becoming anti-racist is not a single point of arrival or even an accumulation of arrivals. Becoming anti-racist as an individual and as a congregation is a process. It's an undertaking. It's a lifelong endeavor. It is a lifelong endeavor to engage in the world, with the world in ways that support human flourishing. Because we are dedicated to the proposition that every person has dignity and worth. And so therefore our work individually and collectively as a congregation is dedicated to supporting human flourishing. I think it is safe to say that for most of us, if not all of us in this room, we would welcome the opportunity to become more aware. Because we hold as core that value of kindness, compassion, connection, joy. And we want for every person who comes in this room to have that sense of sanctuary that we perhaps ourselves have already experienced. We want each person walking in this room to come to know this place as a place that is beyond welcome. It's one thing to welcome a newcomer coming in the door. It's another for them to break through that membrane of welcome to become part of the community. We want this place to be a shelter for seekers of all kinds, where they will find solace and joy. And so we become willing as a community to examine our automatic ways of being in order to create such a space so that we know that it is possible. That is the work of intersectionality, that academic phrase that you may have heard bandied about in our culture, intersectionality. And it comes originally from a very simple metaphor. A Black academic, who I am forgetting her name this morning, but she was the one who came up with the term intersectionality. And she said it is the awareness, just as if you are driving your car and you come to the intersection. And you realize there are all sorts of different people and they all have their different identities. And how are we going to get through this intersection called life without crashing into each other consistently? How are we going to take turns? How are we going to realize that it means something to be Black and gay, and it means something to be white and poor, and that these experiences have commonalities that can be built upon for the liberation of all people? It is a decision to step into that intersection and to notice the flow of traffic. I think of it as I often get in my car and I end up somewhere and I'm not really sure how I got there. My children remind me of this frequently, like, Mom, we're not going there, we're going here. Can you please get on the freeway? And I'll say, oh my goodness, I was paying so much attention to what was happening inside the car that I forgot to pay attention to what was happening outside the car. So the beginning of awakening to becoming anti-racist and anti-oppressive is the beginning of getting in the car and actually focusing on where you're going the whole time. Not just letting Waze take you there. Focusing the entire time and taking in the sounds, the smells, the other people, the cars, the types of cars, and wondering about their experiences as they drive their cars around town. That is the beginning of awakening. And it doesn't have to be boring like being in traffic. It doesn't have to be dreary or trauma-laden and difficult every step of the way. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is hard work. Sometimes we cry because we are disappointed in ourselves and in our leaders and in our world. Sometimes we are trauma-stricken because it is the death of a young Black man yet again. But there is also space for the realization that it is not always about trauma. That it's not always about difficulty, that is not the whole of the story. Not for you, not for me, not for this community. The journey is also inclusive of new insight, reflection, celebration, and joy. Because liberation from suffering always results in new energy being released in the world. Energy that can be used to build upon the common good and widen that circle of welcome, break down that membrane, and bring everyone into that circle of connected, sacred soul. Joy is really important in this work because joy is part of what allows us to resist. But a joy is also just joy on its own terms. Joy is multidimensional, it is multifaceted, it is infectious. I think we see that every day when we pause to take in our surroundings and notice that joy will just appear because it just darn well wants to. We experienced joy a few weeks ago when we had our Silly Hat Sunday, and we just laughed for no reason at all. We just laughed. We all know that joy is critical to the journey. We have all been on these journeys in our lives where suddenly we can be crying and then that crying turns to laughter and then all of a sudden we need a sandwich. We all also know that joy is salvific, that it saves us from despair. It liberates our souls, and it is the very thing that heals our wounded heart. It never erases trauma. It doesn't ignore tragedy. It doesn't minimize the impact of systemic racism or the history of oppression. But it does create a new space within us and around us and between us, wherein something new just might emerge. For the Black community specifically, their experiences of joy are often put through a lens of explanation. It is often nearly impossible for a Black or brown artist to present joy without qualification. And it is not because they themselves feel the need to explain joy. That expectation, that assumption, that is the culture that we live in that says that their joy must be mitigated through the lens of their suffering. So that is something that we can notice here when it acts in our psyches and in this community, and we can then turn to resist. We can turn to question. We can turn to ask. Why is it that I had that thought? It's not necessarily true, it's just a sign of disordered thinking, and we can reorder our thinking. White supremacy culture seeks to exclusively define the Black experience through the lens of trauma and loss and pain. But again, that is only a piece of the story. And as a community of seekers, we can relearn, retrain ourselves to do and to think and to be different. Andre Brock, an associate professor of media studies at Georgia Tech, has affirmed this pathway with this. He writes, "Our job is to simultaneously experience joy and anger in a way that allows us to keep our humanity." Our job is to simultaneously experience joy and anger in a way that allows us to keep our humanity. How thoroughly Unitarian Universalist is that? Keeping our humanity. Which brings me to this idea of woke culture. Another one of those words that has bandied about and become a pejorative currently in our society. And many of us, perhaps because we have been outside of the academic world, are not really all that familiar with what it ever meant in the first place. So here you go. Woke is defined in the Webster Dictionary as being aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Being aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues. It's identified as U.S. slang. It originated in Black English and has gained more widespread use beginning in 2014 as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was officially added to Merriam-Webster's dictionary in 2017. In our current context, woke has now been adopted or co-opted by some as a pejorative against anyone who appears to be left-leaning in their politics. It's become a shorthand among some about what they perceive is wrong with America, and it relies heavily on nostalgia for its fuel. This pejorative use of the word woke forgets that this America that we live in has always been a contested space. It forgets that our democracy has never included every person, and that the only reason it has ever been expanded is because those on the outside of its protections have demanded it be so. And it forgets that many of our democratic norms and expectations are indeed modeled on the forms of democracy and governance developed by the indigenous tribes of North America prior to the arrival of the Europeans. It erases that and instead insists that the founding fathers were the progenitors of these ideas. That somehow the history of enlightenment is the beginning of awakening, rather than one more step in that long human journey of coming to understand who we are and what is possible for the human community. I would suggest to you that it is not a miracle that our Constitution and our democracy has survived for the last 237-ish years. And its survival is not a miracle and it's not a mystery. Survival of our democracy can be directly traced to the civil rights movement and the advocacy of the Black community to be included in our democracy. All of our justice movements, from women's liberation to workers' rights to the LGBTQIA advocacy for the right to marry, these social movements are deeply entwined with the justice work of Black and brown folk. and take much of their framework from the academic and social brain trust of Black Americans. Being woke, then, is just to acknowledge those histories. It's just to acknowledge that that is actually the truth. And then to sort things out in a way that we can claim that truth as our own and to build upon it in positive, collaborative ways. Being woke is critical to the maintenance of our democracy. If being woke is simply being aware and attentive to the important issues that are happening in our community. So in that way, it's core to our identity as Unitarian Universalists. We are a religious movement deeply rooted in the search for truth and meaning, which means we are all in when it comes to observing things as they actually are and working together to make it better for everyone. This means telling the actual truth of our history as Unitarian Universalists, the good and the joyful, as well as the difficult and the not yet there parts of our history. And this means telling the truth of this nation, the contested parts of our nation, and paying attention to what is happening on the ground right now. Paying attention to when and where our democracy, where the freedom of press and speech are being limited right here and right now, in order to support the erasure of cooperative and inclusive democratic processes. This is not the same as saying who you have to vote for or what policy you have to adopt or how you should feel about XYZ issue. The beauty of democracy is recognizing that that messiness, that differing perspective is critical to the process of creating an inclusive democracy, and is what actually helps us to create a common understanding. The beauty of democracy is that it can and should expand over time as we learn more about how to treat each other and the earth with respect and care. So, when I am observing the discourse of our world these days, perhaps you have noticed this as well. When I hear someone use the word woke culture as a pejorative, I know they're not listening anymore. They're not listening anymore. And this is to be held side by side with the ways in which those of us who are liberal, myself included, may also sometimes not be listening. And to try to wake up, to come back to that intersection and to recognize that all of these identities intersecting with each other, trying to get on and trying to get by in this culture that we have created, that every single person matters, that every single body matters, that every single family matters, and that that messiness is something that can create new things in our society. I know that many of us in this room share a concern about the obvious polarization that is happening in our country. I know that many of us in this room are worried about the rise of Christian nationalism, the erasure of civil rights for Black and brown voters, restrictions of abortion access for women, attacks on trans and non-binary folks, and the increase of anti-Semitism on the rise here in this country and in Europe. And we worry about whether or not this democracy, this beautiful, contested, messy democracy, will survive the next election cycle. And we have no crystal balls. I cannot stand up here and promise that there will not be any more disruptions of our democracy. But what I can point us to is that by naming it and talking about it as a community, figuring out what it means to dismantle and resist those things that would suppress our civic action, that is important. It is critical at this time, perhaps more so than it has been in many decades. Perhaps a frame that we can put around this current onslaught of anti-democratic movements is a sign of our success, a sign that our justice movements are growing in connection, in collaboration, in strength. And that perhaps if we just stay the course with each other, we will find our way through. The tools of authoritarianism are the same everywhere, and we are becoming increasingly aware of their presence in our culture. We recognize that a large minority of people in this country do not actually care all that much about democracy, if it means they have to share the table with those they have been taught to fear. And thus they will follow a leader who promises to restore things to some past glory, even when that glory never really existed. So let's just name that as what it is: abusive. It's just abusive. Being woke, being alert and aware to what is happening around us, and then taking action to connect with like-minded people to sustain our democracy, that is the antidote to authoritarianism. That is the antidote to cycles of abuse. It is the antidote that insists that the voice of the ones most impacted matters, and that the narratives we have been trained on are not automatically the narratives through which we will live the rest of our lives, that we can and we must and we are and we will continue to change the narratives towards inclusivity, towards joy, towards empowerment, towards welcome, towards hospitality, towards collaboration. Being woke, therefore, is an act of taking sides. It's not neutrality. It is saying that what we value, honoring and respecting the worth and dignity of all people and supporting democratic processes, that these things are worth having. Let's talk a little bit about what that might look like in this congregation. You've heard the announcements about the annual meeting coming up on May 21st, and I encourage everyone to come to that because our anti-racism team is going to be leading us in some exercises specifically designed to help us wake up and to celebrate and be joyful with one another in this work. We're going to be proposing that we adopt the eighth principle, as well as proposing that we perhaps hang a Black Lives Matter flag on our building. So these things are going to be proposed to the community. We'll discuss them at our May meeting, and then we will vote in the fall to adopt. That's how things kind of work. We propose, and then we adopt. We propose, and then we adopt. We have a little space between it. In between that space of time, we'll have workshops and discussion groups around what that means. And my encouragement to you is to participate fully in that, especially if you have questions, especially if you're not sure what woke means and intersectionality and what does it mean to hang a Black Lives Matter flag and what does all of this stuff actually mean? So that when we make the decision to move forward as a community on those issues, that we know what we mean when we do that. That it is an embodied response in the world. We will also perhaps be exploring this fall caucusing. And for those of you who don't know what caucusing is selecting ourselves into groups based on identity and providing space for people to talk about that within that. So we talk about anti-racism work, we talk about having a white caucus and a black caucus or a BIPOC caucus. And that means that those spaces are designated for people who identify either as white or as BIPOC. And they are intended to allow us to do some of those critical conversations, to do that work for white people, to do that work of white recovery, of recovering a positive identity as a white person and understanding what it means to be an ally, and for BIPOC people to have a place of sanctuary, a place of advocacy, and a place of growth. And then there, are, of course, are times when everyone will talk together. So I know it's a little technical in a sermon, but I just want to explain exactly what that looks like for us. So these things that we're going to be endeavoring to undertake in the next couple of months, in the next couple of years, this is the next step in our endeavor to walk this path together as a community. And from there, we anticipate that we will have new choices to make as a community, new ways of understanding ourselves, new ways of collaborating with other groups in the community, new ways of being in this space, this sanctuary together with one another. Again, it's not about arrival all at once. It's about showing up and doing our best, acknowledging that we will make mistakes as a community, and there will be roadblocks along the way, and there will be disappointments along the way, as well as there will be joyful moments of breakthrough and celebration. And I promise you that those bits of grace, when they arrive, will be really sweet and worth showing up for. We seek in this community then to create the right conditions so that connections to self, to other, and to the other, a whole world in life-affirming ways are not just possible, but highly probable, and even predictably present amongst and between us as we build this beloved community ever more brightly together and with love. Let it be so. Amen.
Twice through. This is the truth that passes understanding. This is the joy to all forever free. Life springs from death and shatters every fetter, and winter turns to spring eternally. This is the truth that passes understanding. This is the joy to all forever free. Life springs from death and shatters every fetter, and winter turns to spring eternally.
While we extinguish our chalice and our memorial candle, as we extinguish our memorial candle, the warmth will be gone. The light will cease to shine. But what of the brightness that it has given to our lives? That light shines still, though it is no longer part of this candle. That light is now part of our cosmos, part of the unity that binds us forever together. And so will it be with the influence of Michelle, in whose memory this candle has burned. In mystery we are born, in mystery we live, in mystery we die. Blessings on your journey, Michelle. And let us now extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, nor the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again. Please be seated for the postlude.
Or stand if you'd like to sing 1041, Santo, Santo. And we're going to be learning this together. Just a little roadmap here on this. We'll do this part twice in Spanish. If you can say burrito, you can say Santo. And the second part we'll do in English. Twice through this, and then back to the first part again. And as always, interpret this word and idea of God however you wish. Santo, 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 nuestro Dios, Señor de toda la tierra, Santo, Santo, nuestro Dios, Santo, 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 nuestro Dios, Señor de toda la tierra, Santo, Santo, nuestro Dios. The people who lives within our struggles, the universal sovereign one God leading us on. Companions all the people who lives within our struggles, the universal sovereign one God leading us on. Santo, 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 nuestro Dios, Señor de toda la tierra, Santo, Santo, nuestro Dios, Santo, 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 Santo es nuestro Dios, Señor de toda la tierra, Santo, Santo es nuestro Dios.
One another and enjoy this delightful spring. Perhaps take a moment to notice those new buds in your yard as you go forth today. May you be a blessing, and amen.